Humanity had always dreamed of exploring the stars, of reaching beyond their home planet to find new worlds and new civilizations. For centuries, Earth had sent ships into the depths of space, sending hopeful messages to distant stars. But no one had expected the response they received. The message from Earth was simple: a plea for friendship, a desire for peace. But what humanity received in return was far from kind. Instead of allies, the humans found cold rejection. The vast galaxy, once seen as a place of opportunity, became a place of fear. No one wanted humanity's presence. The universe itself turned its back on them. At first, it seemed like a misunderstanding. Surely the messages were misinterpreted. Surely some mistake had been made. But soon, it became clear. Humanity had no place among the stars. A powerful galactic council made the decision to exile them, sending a warning to every corner of the galaxy to avoid Earth at all costs. The humans were banished, cast into the far reaches of space where no one could find them, far from any known civilizations. It wasn't just a rejection. It was a punishment. Humanity had become a threat in the eyes of the galaxy, and the punishment was to be forgotten, left to die in the dark void. The humans had no choice but to leave. Their ships, built for exploration, now became their prisons. They drifted through space, lost and alone, with no hope of ever returning home. The vast emptiness stretched endlessly before them, and the humans were left to wonder if their kind would ever again see the light of the stars. But just as it seemed like all was lost, something changed. A sudden signal, one they could never have anticipated, crackled through the silence of space. It was a message, a cry for help from deep within the unknown. For a moment, the humans thought it was a mistake. Perhaps some other species had found them, or maybe it was an automated signal from an ancient satellite. But as they analyzed it further, they realized this was something far more dangerous. The signal was ancient, sent from a time long before humanity had even begun their journey into space. The humans gathered around their monitors, trying to make sense of the strange message. It spoke of a civilization that had existed long ago, a powerful race that had mastered technology beyond imagination. They had once ruled the galaxy, but they had been wiped out, their empire falling into ruin after a catastrophic war. And now, their remains lay scattered across the galaxy, waiting to be discovered by the lucky or the foolish. Humanity, in their desperation, was both. The signal led them to an abandoned station, floating in the deepest, most uncharted part of space. The station was old, its metal rusted, its walls covered in strange symbols. But what caught the humans' attention wasn't the station itself. It was what they found inside. Hidden within the cold, silent hallways were remnants of the ancient technology that had once belonged to the long-lost civilization. Technology that, if used correctly, could change everything for humanity. It was there, in the darkness of that abandoned station, that humanity found their first real hope. They uncovered blueprints, ancient data, and weapons far beyond anything they had ever imagined. It was a chance to survive, a chance to rebuild, and perhaps even a chance to strike back at the galaxy that had cast them aside. The galaxy may have rejected them, but now they had the means to return, stronger than before. But there was a catch. The technology was unstable. As humanity began to experiment with it, strange things started happening. Their ships, once crippled by the weight of their banishment, began to function again, their systems powered by the ancient technology. They were able to build new ships, capable of traveling faster than any other vessel in the galaxy. But the deeper they dug into the technology, the more they began to feel something watching them. A presence, unseen but felt, lurking just outside their reach. At first, it was subtle, just a flicker of lights or a glitch in the systems. But then it escalated. Crew members began to report strange dreams, visions of an ancient race that had perished long ago, their faces twisted in fear. Some swore they heard whispers in the dark, the voice of someone, or something, calling to them from the depths of space. It was as if the station, the technology, and the very energy that powered their ships were alive, aware of their presence. And it wasn't friendly. Despite these strange occurrences, the humans pressed forward. They had no other choice. The galaxy had turned its back on them, and this technology was their only hope. They began to use it to strengthen their ships, to create weapons that could rival anything in the galaxy. They were no longer the weak, helpless species that had been cast aside. They were rising, slowly but surely, from the shadows. But as the days passed, the whispers grew louder. The technology, once a blessing, now felt like a curse. It seemed as though the more they used it, the more they attracted the attention of something far darker than they could have ever imagined. Something old, something powerful, and it was watching them. The humans now faced a terrifying question. Was the power they had uncovered truly a gift, or had they stumbled upon something that would ultimately destroy them all? Would this ancient technology be the key to their survival, or would it be the cause of their undoing? As their ships prepared to leave the station and venture deeper into the unknown, the crew could feel the tension building. The shadows of the galaxy were closing in, and they were not alone. As humanity moved deeper into the unknown, their new technology became both their greatest asset and their most dangerous secret. Their ships, powered by the strange energy they had discovered, soared through the dark void of space at speeds previously thought impossible. They no longer drifted aimlessly. They were now on a mission to survive, to rebuild, and maybe even to strike back against the galaxy that had rejected them. The humans, once scattered and lost, began to organize. They established a fleet, each ship carrying the advanced technology that had been salvaged from the ancient station. They created weapons more powerful than any they had ever seen before. Each new discovery seemed to open the door to another, more incredible possibility. But with each discovery came a creeping fear. What was the true cost of this technology? What had they unleashed? The crew members continued to experience strange dreams. At night, they would see visions of a long-forgotten civilization, one that had fallen into ruin after using the very same technology they were now wielding. The dreams were always the same. The faces of the ancient people, twisted in terror, as though they had known exactly what their technology was capable of, and what it had done to them. The crew tried to ignore the dreams, telling themselves they were just side effects of stress, but deep down, they knew something was wrong. Despite the unsettling dreams, humanity pressed on. They charted new routes through the vast emptiness of space, searching for new planets to settle. Each planet they found, however, was barren, uninhabited, with no sign of life. It was as if the galaxy had already been wiped clean of all civilization. As they ventured further, the humans began to realize that they were not just drifting away from their home planet. They were drifting away from everything. There was no one left to help them, no one to stand by their side. They were on their own, and they knew it. It wasn't until they reached the edge of the galaxy that they encountered their first sign of life since their exile. The signal was faint, almost lost in the vastness of space, but it was there. A small, blinking beacon on a lonely planet. At first, the humans thought it might be a distress signal from another ship, or perhaps another race of beings looking for help. But when they arrived, they found something else entirely. The planet was covered in ruins, ancient, crumbled structures that hinted at a once thriving civilization. But now, it was empty. There were no signs of life, no inhabitants, just the echo of a forgotten past. Yet, there was something odd about the ruins. As the humans explored the remains, they discovered that the ancient race that had once lived here had used the same technology they had found. The ruins were filled with the same strange symbols, the same energy signatures. It was as if this civilization, too, had fallen victim to the very power they were now harnessing. The humans began to search through the ruins, hoping to find answers, but all they uncovered were more questions. There were records, data logs, and blueprints, evidence that the ancient race had once been as powerful as the humans now hoped to be. but the records were incomplete, as if they had been purposely destroyed. There were no explanations, only more cryptic messages warning of the dangers of their technology. The deeper the humans dug, the more they realized they were not just uncovering the past. They were walking in the footsteps of a civilization that had destroyed itself with the very same power they now controlled. And then the message came. It was a transmission sent from somewhere deep within the planet's ruins. It was weak, broken, but it was unmistakable. The message warned humanity of a force beyond their understanding, a force that had once consumed the ancient race and now sought to do the same to them. The message spoke of a creature, an entity, born from the very energy that powered the technology they had discovered. It was a living being, ancient and powerful, and it had been awakened by their use of the technology. The message ended with a chilling warning. You are not alone. The humans were terrified. They had thought they were in control of the technology, but now they realized it was controlling them. The more they used it, the more they felt its influence creeping into their minds. The whispers grew louder. They could hear them in the silence of space, in the hum of their ship's engines, in the quiet of the night. Something was watching them, something ancient and powerful, and it was getting closer. But the humans were not ready to turn back. They had come so far, and now they were more determined than ever to build their empire. They had the power, they had the technology, and they believed they could overcome whatever threat lay ahead. But as they prepared to leave the planet and continue their journey, they knew one thing for sure. They were walking a dangerous path. And the shadows they had seen in the ruins were not just memories of the past, they were a warning. The humans now faced a choice. They could turn away, leave the technology behind, and try to find a new way to survive. Or they could continue on their current path, using the power they had uncovered to rebuild their empire, even if it meant facing the unknown dangers that lurked in the dark. But there was no going back. The galaxy had already rejected them, and now they had to decide if they would rise up from the shadows, or if they would be consumed by them. As their ships left the planet and headed into the vastness of space once more, the humans knew one thing. The real test was just beginning. The power they had found might have saved them, but it also threatened to destroy everything they had built. And whatever was out there, watching them, was not going to let them go without a fight. Humanity's path forward was clear. With the ancient technology now firmly in their hands, the humans had the power to build something they had only dreamed of before, an empire. The first few months were spent in awe of what they had discovered. The technology that once seemed so alien and dangerous had now become their greatest weapon, and with it, they began to construct ships more powerful than any they had ever known. These new ships, massive and advanced, could travel faster and further than the human fleet ever could before. They were equipped with weapons that made even the strongest opponents tremble. Soon, humanity's fleet grew. They started with small skirmishes, testing their newfound strength against the few remnants of the galaxy that still existed. At first, it was simple. They defeated weak, unprepared enemies, conquering systems and claiming planets that had been abandoned or left to fall into ruin. They were no longer the lost exiles drifting in the dark corners of space. They were now a force to be reckoned with, and every victory made them more powerful. But with power came responsibility and fear. Despite their growing strength, the humans could feel the shadows creeping closer. The strange dreams and eerie whispers persisted, growing more frequent, as if something was trying to warn them. There were those among the crew who questioned whether it was wise to continue using the ancient technology. They had already seen what had happened to the long-dead civilization that had created it. They had watched that civilization crumble under the weight of their own power. But the leaders of the human fleet pushed forward. They believed they could control it. They believed they could avoid the mistakes of the past. As the fleet expanded, humanity's empire began to take shape. New colonies were established, new alliances forged with the few other species still willing to speak with them. Humanity's numbers grew, and with it, their influence in the galaxy. They began to see themselves as rightful rulers of the stars, destined to take the place of the ancient civilization that had once ruled. But they were not the only ones watching. One fateful day, a strange ship appeared on the edge of their territory. It was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, larger than any ship they had built, covered in markings that no one could decipher. It came without warning, without communication, just drifting silently into their space. The humans prepared for battle, but the ship made no move to attack. It simply floated there, as though it was waiting for something. And then it spoke. The ship's communication systems crackled to life, and a voice, cold and emotionless, echoed across the human fleet's channels. It was not a human voice. It sounded ancient, almost mechanical, but unmistakably alive. The voice demanded to speak with the leaders of humanity. It claimed to be a descendant of the ancient civilization that had once ruled the galaxy, one of the very beings who had created the technology the humans now wielded. The voice warned them that their use of the technology would have consequences. The empire humanity was building was not their own to create. The power they had uncovered had been left behind for a reason, and the price of using it would be greater than they could imagine. At first, the humans didn't believe the message. They were too powerful now, too confident in their strength. But as the voice continued, as it spoke of ancient history and the downfall of civilizations long gone, the humans began to listen. The voice revealed secrets of the past, of a galaxy once ruled by beings who thought themselves invincible, only to be destroyed by the very power they had controlled. It spoke of an entity, an ancient and powerful force, that had been sealed away by the civilization that had first created the technology. A force that had been awakened by humanity's use of that same power. The message was clear. Humanity was not the first to unlock this technology, and they would not be the last. The price of using it was their very existence. The voice warned them that if they continued down this path, they would bring about the same destruction that had wiped out the ancient civilization. It was a warning that humanity could not ignore. Despite the warning, the leaders of the human fleet were determined to continue. They had come too far to turn back now. The power of the ancient technology was too great, and they believed they could control it. They believed they could conquer the galaxy, rule it in ways no other species ever had. They were ready to fight for their place in the stars. But as they prepared for war, something strange happened. The whispers grew louder, the dreams darker. Crew members began to act differently, their eyes hollow, their minds clouded by something they couldn't explain. It was as if the technology itself was beginning to take hold of them. They were no longer just using it, they were becoming part of it. It was in this moment, when the humans had fully embraced the power they had uncovered, that they realized the true cost of their empire. They had become what they once feared, a civilization bent on power, willing to sacrifice everything for control of the stars. And the technology they had uncovered, the very thing that had given them this power, was now starting to consume them. The price of using it was their humanity. But the galaxy would not wait. The humans, now fully entrenched in their mission, continued to expand their empire. They pushed forward, creating new colonies, conquering new worlds, all while ignoring the warnings that had been given. They believed they were unstoppable. But the darkness was closing in, and the price for their empire was beginning to take shape. The ancient entity, the one that had been sealed away so long ago, was stirring once again. And this time, it was coming for humanity. As they looked to the stars, the humans could no longer ignore the truth. The empire they had built, the empire that had brought them so much power, might also be their undoing. The whispers were no longer just voices in the dark. They were the harbingers of a greater threat. A threat that humanity might not be able to survive. Humanity had built an empire, stronger than anyone could have imagined. Their ships dominated the stars, their colonies spread across the galaxy, and their power was undeniable. They were no longer the exiles they had once been. They were rulers of their own destiny. But the cost of this newfound strength was becoming impossible to ignore. The strange occurrences continued. The whispers in the dark, the dreams that haunted their nights, everything was becoming more intense, more real. Some of the fleet's leaders began to show signs of paranoia, constantly looking over their shoulders as if expecting something to strike at any moment. Others were becoming more aggressive, consumed by the hunger for even greater power. The once united human fleet now showed cracks in its foundation, and there were whispers of rebellion, as some wondered if they had made a mistake in trusting the technology that had given them so much. The strange voice from the unknown ship had been a warning, but humanity had ignored it. Now, the consequences were beginning to unfold. The humans had underestimated the ancient power they had unearthed. It was not a gift, it was a curse. And the entity that had been awakened by their use of the technology was beginning to stir. At first, it was subtle. Small things. A strange feeling of unease in the crew. A sudden loss of control over certain systems. The ships would malfunction, not in any obvious way, but in ways that couldn't be explained. Equipment would break down for no reason, and the once efficient machines started to act erratically. The humans blamed it on faulty wiring or minor technical glitches, but deep down, they knew something more sinister was at play. And then, it happened. The first attack. It wasn't a battle. There were no enemy ships, no warning signs. The fleet's flagship, a massive, imposing ship that was the pride of humanity's empire, suddenly went dark. All communication was lost. The lights flickered, the systems shut down, and the crew aboard the ship vanished without a trace. No one knew what had happened. The only sign of the ship's fate was a cryptic message that appeared on the monitors across the fleet. It is time. The crew of the human fleet was shaken, but the leaders refused to back down. They were too powerful now, too confident in their superiority. They believed they could overcome anything, even the mysterious force that had taken their ship. They set a course to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, to a place where the entity was believed to reside, ready to face whatever awaited them. As they arrived at the dark, desolate region of space, the whispers became deafening. The crew could feel it now, an overwhelming presence, ancient and malevolent, surrounding them. It was as if the very fabric of space was alive, and it was closing in on them. Suddenly, their ships began to fall apart, one by one. The technology they had relied on, the very power that had made them unstoppable, began to fail them. Ships were torn apart by invisible forces, their engines disabled, their weapons useless. The humans fought back, but it was futile. They were no longer in control. The ancient power that had once been their greatest weapon was now their greatest enemy. In the final moments, the human fleet found itself face to face with the true force they had awakened. It was not a physical being, but something far older, far more powerful. It was the energy that had powered the ancient technology, the same energy that had consumed the civilization that had once created it. It was a consciousness, a living force, ancient beyond comprehension, and it had been waiting for humanity to use its power. And now that they had, it was time to pay the price. The entity spoke, its voice filling the minds of every human in the fleet. You are not the first. You will not be the last. The price of power is death, and now you will join those who came before you. In that moment, humanity realized the terrible truth. The power they had uncovered was not meant to be used. It was a trap, set long ago by the ancient civilization who had sought to control the galaxy but had failed. They had created the technology, but in doing so, they had unleashed a force they could not contain. And now, humanity had made the same mistake. The empire they had built, the dreams they had held of conquering the stars, all came crashing down. Their ships disintegrated in space, their colonies turned to dust, and the once proud fleet was no more. The entity had claimed them, just as it had claimed the civilization that had first dared to wield its power. In the end, there was nothing left. The humans were gone, swallowed by the very force they had sought to control. The galaxy, once a place of possibility, was left in darkness, its most powerful species consumed by their own ambition. And as the last of humanity faded into nothingness, the entity turned its attention elsewhere. There would be other civilizations, other species, seeking the same power. And they too would fall, just as humanity had. The stars burned on, silent and uncaring, as the cycle of ambition and destruction began anew.